They called them ghosts in human skin, men who could slip through locked doors, stand over sleeping kings, and vanish before dawn. No army could stop them, no wall could keep them out. For 2 centuries, they haunted empires from Persia to Jerusalem, and leaving behind one chilling truth: no one was untouchable. At their command stood a figure known only as the Old Man of the Mountain, a leader whose word was law and whose reach extended into every court and kingdom. His followers murdered kings and crusaders, vanished into legend, and rewrote the very meaning of fear. Were they zealots blinded by faith, or the first to understand how power truly works? Keep watching, because once you hear what really happened inside their mountain fortress, you'll understand why every ruler in the medieval world slept with one eye open. And if you enjoy stories that reveal the darker side of history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the past they tried to bury. In the high valleys of northern Iran, where snow covers the peaks and clouds swallow the cliffs, stood a fortress called Alamut, the Eagle's Nest. To the world below, it seemed unreachable, carved into the sky itself. In the year 1090, a man named Hassan Isaba seized this stronghold without bloodshed, and from that day forward, the mountain belonged to him. Hassan was no warlord in shining armor. He was a scholar, a mathematician, and a visionary. Educated in the city of Qom, he had studied theology and science before turning against the orthodox order of his time. His loyalty belonged to the Nizari branch of the Ismaili Muslims, a persecuted minority hunted by the Seljuk Empire. From Alamut, Hassan built a new kind of state. It was not a kingdom of soldiers, but of believers, bound together by ideology, discipline, and an unbreakable chain of command. The world would come to know them by one name: the Assassins. The title would echo through centuries, but its origin was misunderstood. Their enemies called them Hashishin, claiming they used drugs to cloud their minds before missions. Yet scholars today agree that it was likely an insult, a word used to brand them as outcasts. In truth, Hassan's followers were highly educated, trained in languages, disguise, and patience. They were masters of observation, capable of blending into places as servants, scholars, or monks. They waited for months or even years to strike. To the outside world, their power seemed supernatural. In reality, it was the power of calculation. Hassan understood that his small, isolated sect could never win on the battlefield, so he rewrote the rules of warfare. Instead of facing vast armies, he would remove the men who commanded them. Instead of raising banners, he would raise fear. From the Eagle's Nest, the assassins looked down upon the empires of the world and began to choose their targets. The first to fall was the man who ruled an empire without a crown. Nizam al-Mulk, Vizier of the Seljuk dynasty, was the most powerful statesman of his age. He governed from behind the throne, a master of politics and war, a man whose words could destroy nations. On an October night in 1092, he was traveling through the Persian countryside when a stranger approached him. The man wore the robes of a holy dervish and bowed respectfully. Then, without a word, he plunged a dagger into the vizier's heart. The killer disappeared into the chaos, leaving behind a dead empire builder and a message carved into fear itself. The assassins had arrived. The murder of Nizam al-Mulk shook the Islamic world. Ministers hid behind walls, and sultans began wearing armor beneath their clothes. The killing had been more than vengeance. It was a demonstration of reach. No fortress, no army, no amount of guards could guarantee safety. The act was not just political murder, it was theater, and its audience was the entire world. For Hassan and his followers, this was the dawn of a new era. The assassins had no cavalry, no archers, and no ships, but they had something greater: the ability to turn courage into terror. and terror into control. Every ruler from Persia to Syria now looked over his shoulder when he prayed. The Crusades brought new enemies and new opportunities. As Christian knights carved out kingdoms across the Middle East, the assassins saw the same corruption and brutality they had long fought in Muslim rulers. They struck where it mattered most, at the heads of power. In 1192, Conrad of Montferrat, newly crowned king of Jerusalem, was walking through the city of Tyre when two men approached him dressed as monks. They bowed as if to offer a blessing, then stabbed him in the chest before being cut down themselves. Both men confessed allegiance to the assassins before dying. The assassination sent shockwaves through Christendom. Some whispered that Richard the Lionheart had secretly paid for it. Others claimed it was the will of God. The truth, like the killers, vanished in the crowd. In Syria, another leader rose to power within the Nizari sect, a man named Rashid ad-Din Sinan, who had become known to crusaders as the Old Man of the Mountain. His presence alone could paralyze armies. When Saladin, the great unifier of Islam, laid siege to one of Sinan's fortresses, he awoke one morning to find a dagger pinned into the ground beside his bed. The blade was poisoned, and a note beside it read, "You are in our power." Saladin lifted the siege. Whether the tale is truth or myth hardly matters. The message achieved what armies could not. What kind of enemy leaves you alive simply to prove they could have ended you? The assassins did not seek conquest, they sought equilibrium. They were a counterweight to the chaos of empires, a silent force ensuring that arrogance always came with a cost. To outsiders, the assassins were devils. To themselves, they were instruments of divine justice. Their training began with belief, not violence. New recruits learned philosophy, science, and languages. They memorized the Quran, studied logic, and practiced patience until it became a reflex. They learned how to live unseen, to move without suspicion, and to kill without hesitation. Their title, Fidai, meant the one who sacrifices himself. Death was not failure, it was fulfillment. What made them terrifying was not brutality, but precision. They never massacred civilians, never slaughtered indiscriminately. They killed only those who threatened their existence, and they always did it publicly, where others could see. Their murders were messages. Sometimes they struck at dawn prayers, other times at banquets or parades. They wanted their victims to understand what was happening in the final moment, to recognize that faith, not greed, had brought the blade. Rulers began sending envoys to Alamut to negotiate protection. They offered gold, horses, even political favors in exchange for peace. Fear became currency, and Hassan-i-Sabah was its master banker. What do you do when killing one man is more powerful than winning a war? Centuries later, the legend of the assassins would be retold by travelers and enemies who did not understand them. Marco Polo claimed that Hassan drugged young men with hashish, carried them into gardens filled with wine and beautiful women, and told them they had tasted paradise. When they woke up, he promised they could return only by dying in service. It was a story that spread through Europe, fascinating and horrifying listeners in equal measure. Yet historians today believe it was pure propaganda. The Gardens of Paradise were a metaphor for spiritual reward, not a drug-filled illusion. The word Hashishin was likely a slur, invented by opponents who saw the Nizaris as dangerous heretics. In reality, the assassins did not need narcotics to inspire loyalty. Their devotion came from conviction and intellect. They were one of the most educated communities in the medieval world. Their fortresses contained observatories, libraries, and archives. Even European chroniclers who despised them admitted that the Nizaris possessed knowledge few others had. But the West was more captivated by the myth, the idea of a hidden cult seducing men into murder through pleasure in paradise. That myth would survive long after Alamut fell. twisting truth into legend and giving birth to a new word: assassin. No empire lasts forever. In the mid-13th century, the Mongols swept across Asia, burning everything in their path. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, brought his siege engines to Persia in 1256 and demanded that the Nizari surrender. The assassins resisted as long as they could, but their arrows could not pierce Mongol armor, and their daggers could not reach Hulagu's heart. When Alamut finally fell, its library, one of the finest in the Islamic world, was burned to ashes. Centuries of learning vanished in smoke. But the assassins were not entirely destroyed. Some fled westward into Syria, surviving under Mamluk rule. Others blended into small mountain communities, preserving their teachings in secret. Even stripped of fortresses, their influence endured. The fear that they had planted into the minds of rulers never truly disappeared. Their legacy evolved from political strategy into linguistic heritage. The very word assassin entered Western languages, no longer tied to faith or philosophy, but to the act itself, one person killing another for a cause or command. Centuries later, their legend would inspire novels, games, and conspiracy theories. But the truth remains stranger than fiction. The Nizari Ismailis were not madmen. They were survivors who weaponized belief in an age of chaos, and in doing so, they invented a new kind of warfare, one that required no armies, only patience and conviction. The story of the assassins is not just about bloodshed or betrayal. It is about the fragility of power and the endurance of ideas. They showed the world that fear can rule as effectively as any sword, that ideology can outlive empires, and that sometimes the smallest group can leave the deepest scar on history. The dagger they carried has become a symbol for every covert strike, every secret order, every whispered plot that changes the course of nations. Perhaps that is their greatest victory, the immortality of fear itself. So ask yourself, if a handful of believers could bring kings to their knees with nothing but devotion and knives, how many unseen powers still move through the world today, reshaping history in silence? If you found this story as haunting as the history itself, leave a like, share it with someone who loves forgotten legends, and subscribe, because the past still hides more secrets waiting to be uncovered.